Hey, folks, and welcome to the video lectures for Philosophy 120 Critical Thinking. What we're doing today is going over some introductions, what the class is like, how we're going to handle the format, and give us a bit of a preview of our initial subject matter. Before we go too far along, I just want to say how much I deeply appreciate you guys bearing with me and being patient through the technical difficulties and other things that have been a difficult start to a semester. For me personally, this has been a uniquely challenging semester so far, but we should be on track and able to move on with the rest of our semester and go on from here with everything being nice and steady. Check back on the Blackboard announcements for how all those sort of things are affecting dates and how we're going to move forward for the rest of the semester. In the meantime, though, one of our main goals is introductions and overview for this whole stuff. So, first off, my name is Taylor Sutton, and I'll be your instructor for the course. So, it's my voice that's narrating over these lectures. Until I get the hang of this video software, there won't be a live video of me chatting and talking on top of these things. But, in the meantime, you get to simply experience my lovely voice on top of all this instead of also enjoying my face. For all of that sounds odd. I do have a selfie on here, though, so that it's not a totally unpersonalized experience. And yeah, it's a little bit terrible, but I'm not big into selfies and attention. So, yeah, I'm the main instructor and grader for the course, and please feel free to contact me with questions, especially now that I've got all of the technical and logistics side of things figured out. I should be able to catch up on my backlog of emails and get back to you guys rather quickly. So, as far as reaching out to me, so for one, I've got a lot of this info on the syllabus itself, which you can find in the content folder of Blackboard, but just so that you guys get exposed to it an additional time. So, my email, phone number, and office are listed right here. I try my best, now that we're up and going, to answer emails all day until about 8 p.m. I try and leave at least a little bit of a separation between my work life and my home life. And I generally try and answer emails during the term within about 24 to 48 hours, and sometimes much faster. The phone number is not the best way to reach me. It's actually a bit more of a voicemail service through Google Voice, where if you call me, it'll go straight to voicemail. But if you leave me a message, I get notified immediately and can get back to you as quickly as I can. So for the most part, use email to contact me, especially now that I'm able to get through my backlog of things. But if you do have an emergency on something, like if your computer's not working or whatever else, feel free to call me and leave a message so that I can get back to you as quickly as I can for emergency things. But I don't answer calls after about 9, so if we've got an assignment due at midnight, please don't be calling at 11:45 telling me how your computer won't work. That's an instance of leave me a message or shoot me an email, and we'll take care of it after the fact. Since I'm teaching only online, I am actually not in my office on a regular schedule, but I am in there off and on throughout the semester as I attend meetings and deal with research and whatever else. So I don't have regularly posted office hours. However, please feel free to schedule an appointment to meet up with me face to face, and we can go over whatever we can to get, to help you out and take care of problems. Now, again, all this info is on the syllabus, along with an overview of how the course works. And you can find this in the course content part of the Blackboard page for the class. But it's worth talking about so that we're all clear about these things. It's worth noting that you must read the syllabus, especially since this is an online course. I know a lot of people tend to just skim those things, or they take it and they throw it in a folder or a trash can and never look at it. But especially because the class is online, you need to be aware of how the course policies and things work. So, the class is online only. That means that there are no in-person meetings on campus for anything that we do in the class. There are no in-person exams. You can do everything through Blackboard. You don't need to worry about coming to the West Lafayette campus for pretty much anything, unless you would like to meet up with me in person. Now, the dates on the syllabus are going to change due to our hiccup, to put it mildly, getting the semester started. But in general, what will happen is we release content for the class in 2-week chunks, what I'm referring to as a unit. At the start of each unit, I'll upload a folder to Blackboard that has all the content for it. And this folder will have a checklist of what it is that you need to read, listen to, or watch, and do to complete everything required for that unit. Now, in general, the units are available for the length of time listed on the syllabus or the updated course schedule on Blackboard, and you'll have from the time that the unit opens until 11:59 p.m. on the last day of that unit to complete the assignments, unless, again, something comes up and we adjust otherwise. Generally, these are about 2-week chunks of time. You can complete the assignments in any order you like and any time within that couple of week time period. But I do have a couple of rules on that. I'm not worried about when you complete assignments, and you can do it at your own pace. You can do it all in one sitting if you like. You can do it all as soon as it opens or wait to the last minute. However, once the due date passes for an assignment, Blackboard will generally automatically block you from being able to take it. Now, if something comes up, if life happens, as it unfortunately does, I will happily make adjustments, particularly if something happens on my end of the course. It's a rule of mine that I think is just common sense that you guys should never have to suffer for things that are out of your control. If that's the case, then we make adjustments and I open the assignment back up for you. But the assignments will automatically close once the due date for an assignment's passed. And so once it's closed, you can't retake it. If you just forgot about it, that's not really a great excuse. So, yeah, let me know how things happen. Let me know if life happens. We will make adjustments. I am, I think, a fairly reasonable sort of person when it comes to these things, but you do need to check with me and let me know about stuff. I do prefer it if you let me know ahead of time if an assignment's not going to be completed, rather than waiting until after the fact or at the last minute. If you can know about things that happen, like if there's a trip, or I know I've had students that were in the military before and had to deal with deployment issues. If you know something's coming up, let me know ahead of time and we'll schedule around it and find a way to make it work. This is preferable to doing stuff after the fact, but we'll figure things out. Online courses are uniquely difficult in a lot of ways due to the lack of regularly scheduled meeting times. So we do have to make some allowances that maybe we wouldn't normally have in a face-to-face class. So, the goal of this class overall is, one way to put it, or one way I like to think of it as, trying to help you think like a philosopher. Critical thinking is something that's a general life skill, and it's something we'll talk a little bit more about in detail at the end of this and over the course of the first couple of chapters. But the way the class is structured somewhat is to help you think like a philosopher. Philosophy is the field that critical thinking and logic generally get studied in their purest forms in. Mathematics, engineering, and several other fields do focus on these things, but philosophy is the area of the university or the area of academia that focuses on studying this kind of thinking on its own and in its purest form. And I want to spend a few minutes clarifying what exactly that means. What does it mean when I say that I want to help you think like a philosopher? Or what is this philosophy stuff that you've inadvertently signed yourself up to? If you guys have had some of my other intro courses before, this will probably be similar material, but most people haven't had much of a background in philosophy. So I think it's worth at least briefly going over. So whenever we talk about philosophy or thinking about a philosopher or something like that, we're using the word in a little bit different way than a lot of people do in ordinary English. We're not talking about my philosophy or so-and-so's philosophy of life, or like, oh, well, my philosophy is you should never hurt people or something like that. We're not using the term quite in that way. Instead, we're talking a lot more about a field of study with its own subject matter, just like we might talk about biology or physics or economics or chemistry or agribusiness and so on. And so philosophy, when we name it as such, is just that. It's a field of study. It's an area of the university. It's a department. It's a subject matter. And it has its own unique sorts of questions and topics. Now, not everybody's real clear on what those are, since, like I said, most people don't have much of a background in this stuff. But that's all right. I'm not assuming that you do. We can get a few clues about what that subject matter is like from the name, just like biology is literally the study of life, or economics is the management of the home, or the study of the laws and the order and structure of the home. Philosophy literally means the love of wisdom, from the Greek terms philo and sophia. Now, at its heart, the love of wisdom doesn't exactly explain a whole lot for us. That doesn't tell us anything concrete or detailed about the subject matter at all. Instead, probably the better definition, rather than just looking at the names or the things you might immediately see on Wikipedia, is the idea of philosophy being the study of fundamental principles and concepts. Philosophy is the area of the university, it's the field, it's the subject matter that studies the ideas that serve as the foundations of every other aspect of life, or every other study or area of interest. Like, for example, there are philosophers of science, there's people who specialize in the so called philosophy of science, that do things like investigate what science is, or what's the best way to go about doing it, what standards should we use in a theory, what counts as good evidence. Should we treat these theoretical things like protons as being real, or just a useful shorthand for certain experiment results? Their philosophers of science, for example, are not scientists. They don't actually go out into labs and poke things with sticks or run them through centrifuges or whatever else that you might do in studying the empirical world around us. I know I just glossed over a lot, STEM majors. I'm sorry, it's not meant to be offensive. But philosophers of science, they don't do science. They look at the assumptions and the principles and the ideas that make science work. They try and ask questions about the fundamental ideas at the core of doing science. Because honestly, scientists have better things to do in most of their time. Scientists, for example, use the scientific method, but they don't often ask, why do we do it this way rather than another? Even the simple answer, it works, is itself a philosophical question. That's a fundamental assumption that scientists need in order to do the kinds of stuff that they do. Similarly, philosophers, we identify those kinds of fundamental assumptions. And as part of that, philosophers end up studying what we might call the big questions of life. Things like, what is real? What's the point of all this? Why are things this way rather than another? What standards should I be following when I do this? What sort of a life should I live? What does it mean for something to be right or wrong? These are the kinds of fundamental questions about life and about human experience that other fields often don't get to. The natural sciences, psychology, sociology, these different fields may study what people believe about certain topics, or they might investigate certain parts of the question having to do with the physical, material, and sensible things around us, the stuff that we can see and experience and whatever else. But they rarely ask or try and get at the core of the question itself, that is actually trying to answer the question. Philosophers, the guys, are the people, not to be sexist, philosophers are the people that actually approach these questions as their own subject matter. And sometimes this ends up looking like asking a whole lot of stupid questions about obvious stuff, and it turning out that these types of questions are actually nowhere near as obvious or as well understood as a lot of people take them to be. Take, for example, something like the question, when do we know something? Now, on its own, that seems like a dumb question. You guys have all made it to college. You all know things. And you all plainly know things. And it seems like everybody knows if they know something or not. If you were to meet a friend, you might ask, hey, do you know when Brothers is open tonight, or something like that? And generally, they don't have to wonder whether or not they know it. So it seems like an obvious matter that doesn't take any investigating whatsoever. But if I were to ask you to take a moment to literally pause the video for a second and try and come up with a definition of knowledge, I would wager small amounts of money that it would actually be somewhat difficult for you. But literally, take a moment. Try and come up with a definition of knowledge. I'll wait. Now, if you have that definition, if you've got it in your head or jotted down, or if you actually paused, I want you to ask yourself, So, how is that different from belief or from a lucky guess? Defining the differences and drawing the line between knowledge or belief or a lucky guess or things like that can often be somewhat difficult. It can be hard to clearly and precisely understand something like what knowledge is or when do I know something. And this is something that comes easily and obviously to us. Like, again, as I said, everybody knows when they know something. If we have this much difficulty defining and pinning down and understanding something as basic as knowledge, well, imagine all the kinds of things that we don't really understand. Imagine all the stuff that might sound dumb when we ask questions about it, but is very much something that we don't understand well, or something that's confusing or odd. So, philosophy often asks very fundamental, very basic questions that occasionally sound dumb, but actually reveal things that really need investigating and need a lot of effort devoted to them. And these are things like the big questions I mentioned just a minute ago. And so philosophy is where questioning and investigating these kinds of big questions happens. Now, as I said, one of my goals for this class and for the subject matter we're studying is to help you think like a philosopher in certain ways. It's essentially to give you practice and skill at asking those kinds of fundamental, penetrating questions that get at the core of this sort of thing. And this is something that studying philosophy and going through this stuff is actually fantastically useful for. It helps us develop what we call critical thinking. Now, on its own, critical thinking is something like a deep and critical analysis of facts in order to form a judgment. And this is something that you've done countless times in your life and in other classes and in other subjects. Mathematicians and scientists are particularly well known for helping developing critical thinking skills. You do the same thing in writing and literature courses. Almost every field, almost everything you do involves some element of critical thinking, where you take a certain set of facts or a bit of evidence or something that you've experienced, and you analyze it and try and critically, that is, asking questions and forming critiques of the subject matter to better understand it, relate it to other pieces of info, and eventually draw judgments about it. Is this accurate? Can I trust this? Should I do this? These are the kinds of questions that critical thinking helps us approach. And honestly, this is the practical and wide reaching application of philosophy. Philosophical thinking is critical thinking. It's being able to look at a given problem or a subject, get at the core elements of it, and try and understand it better. And so when we study philosophy, there's a practical side to it that should honestly help you no matter what your major is or what your life goals are. And by studying it and developing critical thinking, by taking this class, you should be able to be a whole lot more proficient at these types of skills and at any sort of challenge that you face in your professional and student lives. Now, we're going to save most of this sort of detail for much later in the first chapter or two. But overall, there's three different things that this class is going to focus on. There are three elements to critical thinking, according to some researchers, that we're going to focus on in particular. The first of these is an attitude of how to approach the elements of a problem in a critical, thoughtful way. This means developing an attitude and an approach to problems that actually makes it possible for you to approach them in the ways that we need to be approaching them. If you go into work one day and you just have a gut feeling about something, and you go with your first instinct on whatever the problem is, no matter what, you're not really doing a whole lot of critical thinking. You're not doing much in the way of analysis here. Your attitude's all wrong to allow you to explore and get into the deeper elements of what's going on. And that kind of quick judgment is kind of the opposite of the attitude we're going to be working on. Instead, we want to try and cultivate an attitude of approaching problems in a critical, thoughtful way. By critical, again, we mean something like critique. We mean taking each of the individual elements of a problem and asking, should this be here? Why is this here? How does it fit in with the other elements? By taking that sort of approach, we can ask the right sorts of questions to figure out things about everything we approach. Now, the second element, and the thing that we're going to focus on the most in this class, is a knowledge of the elements of logic and reasoning. Logic literally is the formal study, or it's the study of organized thinking. And again, we'll go over this stuff in the next couple of lectures, so don't worry about getting notes down at the moment. This is literally meant to be a get your feet wet, this is what the class studies. But for the most part in this class, we're going to be approaching the tools and the vocabulary and the methods of doing basic logic and reasoning. We're going to look at fallacies. We're going to look at how to analyze arguments. We're going to look at what counts as a good argument or what counts as a bad one. We're going to study the different elements of logic and reasoning so that by knowing about them, you'll have effectively a toolkit that you can use to approach different problems and topics. If you have a name for a particular type of concept, you can apply it to the world around you in a lot of different ways. And your skill at applying those is the third element we're going to focus on in this class. For the most part, we're going to be doing a lot of reading and practicing doing basic logic stuff out of our textbook, but we're also going to be applying it to a few real-world cases. You're going to have homework assignments that, in general, allow you to explore different personal aspects of what's going on, things out of the news, or things that are just parts of real life. And you'll get to apply the subject matter that we're studying to those kinds of elements. We'll also look at a handful of very simple philosophical theories, because again, this isn't a full-blown like history of philosophy class. We don't have to worry about spending lots of time on that sort of thing. But the occasional glimpse at how professional philosophers approach problems and some of the kinds of problems that they work on should be able to show us a little bit more on how to apply the same things that we'll be studying in here. So, our class will focus on doing those three elements, mainly by going over two as a matter of material, but by studying two, we'll be able to develop one and three and become better critical thinkers because of it. We'll be able to say, oh, well, I should approach this problem in this way so I can apply all my vocabulary and apply my methods. And the more practice you have at that, the more skill you'll have at using critical thinking. So, that's the class in a nutshell. Again, just sort of a recap for us. You need to take a look at the syllabus. It's got detailed descriptions of each of the different kinds of assignments. The short versions are you're going to have some homework, you're going to do a lot of reading and writing, but in general, check the unit checklists, check the content folders on Blackboard under course content, and follow the checklists, refer back to the syllabus, and ask me any questions you've got. We'll focus on critical thinking, we'll look at developing these three elements, and hopefully we will have a great semester now that we've got the initial hurdles out of the way. So, go back to your syllabus, ask me any questions that you've got, and in the meantime, take a look at the future lectures, and happy arguing, guys.